sorry, what's going on? That was removed from the collection. It was reported stolen 14 months ago.
That afternoon, Jeannie Nelson, head archivist of the Whitmore Institute's Special Collections Division for nearly a decade, was placed in handcuffs and charged with trafficking irreplaceable historical documents on the global black market. Within 6 hours of her arrest, federal investigators had traced over $340,000 in payments to a shell account in Geneva, Switzerland. And somewhere across an ocean, in the hands of a private collector who paid cash and asked no questions, sat the Whitmore Institute's 200-year-old founding charter, the single most important document in the building's entire history. It has never been recovered. Here is what most people do not understand about archives. They are not just libraries. They are storage units for human memory. Every letter, every map, every faded document sitting inside a climate-controlled drawer represents something real, a moment, a decision, a life that actually happened. And the entire system runs on one simple belief, that the person holding the keys will protect what is inside. Jeannie Nelson held those keys for 15 years. So the question that kept coming up during this investigation, the question that nobody could fully answer, was a simple one. How do you steal something that is supposed to be priceless? How do you put a number on history and then sell it to the highest bidder? By the end of this video, you will know exactly how she did it. If you are new here, subscribe now, because this is the kind of story we cover every single week. Jeannie Nelson did not grow up around wealth. She grew up around want. She was raised in a small, tight house in a working-class neighborhood where money was always the subject of the quietest arguments and the longest silences. There were no family vacations. There were no extra things. But there were books, a few of them. Anyway, and Jeannie treated each one like it was something sacred. When she was around 9 years old, she discovered the local public library 2 blocks from her school. She started going every day after class. Not to check books out, but just to be there. She was drawn to the oldest things in the building. The faded maps pinned behind glass, the bound collections of old letters, the dusty almanacs that nobody else ever touched. While other kids her age were outside, Jeannie was turning pages that hadn't been turned in decades. There was something about holding an old document that felt different to her. It wasn't just reading. It was touching time. And from a very early age, Jeannie Nelson did not just want to read about history. She wanted to own a piece of it. She carried that feeling all the way through school. She was a focused student, not flashy, but steady. She went on to earn a master's degree in library science, graduating with strong marks and a clear plan. In 2009, she was hired as an assistant archivist at the Whitmore Institute, a respected cultural institution known for one of the most impressive rare document collections on the East Coast. She was good at the job. Better than good, actually. She learned the collection faster than anyone expected. She knew where everything was, what condition it was in, and what it was worth. She built systems. She trained junior staff. She caught errors that others missed. By 2015, she had been promoted to head of special collections, with a salary of $71,000 a year. It was the kind of position that people spent entire careers working toward. In 2017, her annual performance review described her work as showing meticulous cataloging and unmatched institutional knowledge. Her supervisors trusted her completely. The board respected her. The staff looked up to her. From the outside, Jeannie Nelson looked like exactly what the Whitmore Institute needed her to be. A dedicated professional. A careful guardian of history. But something had been growing quietly underneath all of that. The same feeling she had as a little girl standing in front of those glass cases, pressing her fingers against the frame. She didn't just want to protect these things. She wanted to keep them. It started with a map. In March of 2018, the Whitmore Institute launched a routine digitization project. The goal was simple: scan the older documents in the collection, create high-quality digital copies, and store the originals safely. It was exactly the kind of project that Jeannie Nelson was built for. She oversaw the entire process. She handled the documents personally, and she decided what got scanned, what got stored, and what got logged. Somewhere in the middle of that project, Jeannie removed a 19th-century land survey document from the collection. It was a detailed, hand-drawn map of a county boundary from the 1840s, rare, fragile, and worth far more than most people in the building realized. She replaced it with a reproduction, A copy so clean and carefully made that it sat in the archive drawer looking exactly like the real thing. Then she waited. Nobody checked. Nobody compared the physical document against the digital scan. Nobody flagged anything unusual. The project wrapped up on schedule, the files were saved, and life at the Whitmore Institute went on as normal. That was the moment everything changed. Not because Jeannie had taken something, but because she had learned something. She had learned that the gap between what was supposed to be in those drawers and what was actually in them was wider than anyone knew. And she was the only person with enough knowledge to see that gap clearly. Over the next 6 years, she worked that gap like a system. She focused almost entirely on uncatalogued donor collections, boxes of documents that had been donated to the Institute over the decades, but never formally entered into the main records. Old family letters, leather-bound ledgers, hand-drawn maps, personal diaries. These were items that existed inside the building, but barely existed on paper. There was no clean trail to follow, no easy way to notice they were gone. Jeannie would pull items from these collections, sometimes one at a time, sometimes in small groups. She would photograph them, package them carefully, and pass them along to an online rare document dealer who asked very few questions and paid very quickly. The money came back to her through a series of accounts that looked, on the surface, like ordinary transactions. She was not reckless about it. She was not greedy in obvious ways. She moved slowly and carefully, the same way she had always handled the documents themselves, with patience, with precision, and with a complete understanding of how the system worked. And for 6 years, the system never pushed back. Nobody noticed. Nobody raised a hand. Nobody looked twice. The archive was quiet, and Jeannie Nelson kept the keys. Behind every document Jeannie Nelson sold, there was a story that belonged to someone else. That is the part that gets lost when people talk about crimes like this. It is easy to think of old papers and faded maps as things, objects sitting in drawers, collecting dust, waiting for researchers who may never come. But every single item that passed through Jeannie's hands had a reason it existed. It had a family. It had a history. And somewhere out there, it had people who were still connected to it. The Hargrove County Historical Society had donated a collection of Civil War-era letters to the Whitmore Institute in 1987. 34 handwritten letters, sent between a Union soldier named Corporal Elias Drummond and his wife back home in Virginia. They were the only surviving record of that correspondence, the only proof that Elias and his wife had lived through those years, written to each other, and waited for a war to end. The Historical Society had trusted the Whitmore Institute to protect those letters until a proper exhibit could be arranged. By the time anyone went looking for them, they were gone. Every single one. Sold as a private lot to a collector overseas who had no idea, or perhaps did not care, what they actually meant to the people who had given them up. The Drummond letters were never recovered. Then there was the Pettaway family. Raymond Pettaway was 81 years old when he first contacted the Whitmore Institute in 2019. His great-grandfather, a sharecropper named Amos Pettaway, had kept a personal diary during the 1890s, a remarkable document that had somehow survived over a century and made its way into a donor collection years earlier. Raymond had spent the better part of 2 decades trying to locate it. He wanted to hold it before he died. He wanted his grandchildren to read it. He wanted proof, in his great-grandfather's own handwriting, that the man had existed and had mattered. The Institute told Raymond the diary was in the collection and that arrangements would be made. He waited. He followed up. He was patient, the way people are when they have already been waiting for 20 years. What nobody told Raymond Pettaway was that his great-grandfather's diary had already been sold. It was gone before he ever made that first phone call. Raymond passed away in 2022. He never held that diary. His family never got their answer. These are the people Jeannie Nelson's choices erased. If this story is making you feel something, you are not alone. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it now. There's a lot more to come. It was a single stamp that brought the whole thing down. In the fall of 2023, a rare documents librarian at a university in London was processing a new acquisition, a 19th-century surveying ledger that the university had purchased from a private reseller. It was a clean transaction, properly documented, nothing unusual on the surface. The librarian set it on her desk, opened the front cover, and began the standard intake review. And then she stopped. In the bottom left corner of the first interior page, nearly hidden beneath a layer of careful cleaning, was a faint rectangular stamp. She leaned in closer. She had seen that stamp before, not in person, but in a published catalog from an American institution. It was the acquisition stamp of the Whitmore Institute's Special Collections Division. She photographed it immediately and sent the image to a colleague in the United States, who confirmed it within the hour. The ledger had not been sold. It had not been deaccessioned. According to every record the Whitmore Institute held, that ledger was still sitting in a drawer in their archive. The university contacted the FBI art crime team the same week. What followed was the kind of investigation that moves quietly but moves fast. Agents pulled shipping manifests from the reseller in London and traced the ledger backward through the supply chain. It had passed through 2 middlemen before reaching London, but the original point of sale was an online rare document dealer based in the United States, a small operation that specialized in estate collections and private sales. The dealer's transaction records showed a pattern of sales going back to early 2018. Documents of varying sizes and ages, sold at prices ranging from a few $100s to tens of thousands. All of them described in vague terms. All of them listed as coming from a private collection. All of them shipped from the same zip code as the Whitmore Institute. Agents then pulled the payment records tied to the dealer's account. The money had been moving in one clear direction, into a PayPal account registered under a name that meant nothing until investigators ran it against the Institute's employee database. It came back to Jeannie Nelson. Her personal PayPal account had received 47 separate payments over a 6-year period. When agents totaled the deposits, the number came to $342,000. They cross-referenced the dates of each payment against the Institute's internal digitization logs, the very logs that Jeannie herself had maintained. Every single payment lined up with a project she had personally overseen. She had kept perfect records, and those records had just buried her. The body camera was already recording when the agents walked through the door. It was a Tuesday morning, just after 10 o'clock. The Whitmore Institute's reading room was open, and Jeannie Nelson was standing near the back reference table, deep in conversation with a graduate researcher who had come in to review a collection of 18th-century land deeds. The room was calm. Quiet in the way archives always are, that particular stillness that comes from old things and careful people. 3 agents entered in plain clothes. 1 approached the front desk. 2 walked directly toward Jeannie. She looked up, and for just a moment, something crossed her face. Not panic, not guilt, just a quick and careful stillness. The way a person looks when they are deciding very fast what kind of situation they are standing in. She decided to be confident. "Ms. Nelson," the lead agent said, "we need to speak with you about several items from the Special Collections inventory." Jeannie set down the folder she was holding. "I'm happy to help," she said. "Whatever you're looking for, I can pull the provenance records. I have documentation for everything in this building." The agent nodded slowly. "What about the items that are no longer in this building?" She didn't flinch. If something was removed, it went through proper deaccession channels. "I have provenance for all of it." The second agent opened a folder and placed it on the table in front of her. It was a printout of her email correspondence with the online rare document dealer, 41 emails spread across 5 years, written from her personal account, describing items, confirming shipments, and negotiating prices. Her name was at the top of every single one. The room went very quiet. Jeannie Nelson looked down at those pages for a long moment. She didn't speak. She didn't offer another explanation. Whatever version of the story she had been preparing to tell seemed to leave her all at once, like air going out of a room. She was placed in handcuffs without resistance. The body camera caught everything. The slow walk from the reference table toward the exit, the graduate researcher frozen in his chair, the other staff members stepping back against the walls. And it caught the shelves. Row after row of carefully labeled boxes and archival folders, organized with a precision that had taken 15 years to build. Jeannie Nelson walked past all of it without looking up. At the front desk, her staff badge sat where she had set it down at the start of her shift that morning. Nobody picked it up. The courtroom was nothing like the archive. Where the Whitmore Institute had been quiet and still, the federal courthouse was hard and bright. Fluorescent lights, wooden benches, the low hum of people waiting for something heavy to land. Jeannie Nelson sat at the defense table in a dark blazer, her hands folded in front of her, her face giving very little away. She was facing 2 charges: theft of major cultural property and wire fraud. Together, they carried the kind of weight that changes the entire shape of a person's life. The prosecution laid the case out methodically. The PayPal transfers, the emails, the shipping records, the 47 transactions, the $342,000. They walked the jury through the timeline from the first missing map in 2018 all the way to the London ledger that had started the investigation. It was a clean, well-documented case, and it showed. But the moment that the courtroom truly went still came when the Pettaway family took the stand. Marcus Pettaway, Raymond's youngest son, stood at the witness podium and spoke for just under 7 minutes. He talked about his father, about the decades Raymond had spent searching for his great-grandfather's diary, about the phone calls to the Institute, about the years of waiting and following up and being told to be patient. He talked about sitting with his father in the last months of his life, still waiting for a diary that had already been sold. My father just wanted proof, Marcus said, that his great-grandfather's life was real, that somebody had thought it was worth writing down, and somebody sold that away for a few $100s. There was no sound in the room when he finished. When the verdict came back, it was guilty on both counts. At sentencing, the judge looked directly at Jeannie Nelson before he spoke. He said that what made this case different from ordinary theft was not the dollar amount and not the number of items taken. It was the position. He said that archives exist because society agrees to trust one person with the job of keeping history safe. He said that Jeannie Nelson had been that person, and she had chosen, repeatedly and deliberately, to betray that trust for personal gain. He sentenced her to 4 years in federal prison. He ordered her to pay full restitution on every item that could be valued. And he issued a lifetime ban from working in any archival, library, or cultural institution in the United States. Jeannie Nelson was taken from the courtroom without a word. The Pettaway family sat in the gallery and held each other quietly as she left. The Whitmore Institute reopened its Special Collections Division 6 weeks after the arrest. The doors looked the same. The shelves looked the same. The carefully labeled boxes and archival folders were still there, still organized in the precise order that Jeannie Nelson had spent 15 years building. But the people who worked there knew that something was permanently different. There were gaps now, not just in the inventory, but in the trust that the whole place had been built on. Investigators were able to trace and recover 23 of the stolen items. Some were returned from overseas buyers who cooperated willingly. Others were found in private collections and reclaimed through legal action. But the majority of what Jeannie had sold over those 6 years was simply gone, scattered across private hands in cities and countries that had no reason to give anything back. The Drummond letters, all 34 of them, were never found. The Pettaway diary was never found. The Whitmore Institute's 200-year-old founding charter, the single most irreplaceable item in the entire collection, has still not been recovered. In the months that followed the trial, the Institute overhauled its entire chain of custody system. Every item in the collection, cataloged or not, was physically verified against the digital records. New check-in and check-out procedures were introduced for every document that left a drawer for any reason, including digitization. A second staff member was required to sign off on every inventory review. The changes were necessary. They were also about 5 years too late. Other institutions across the country took note. Several launched their own internal audits. A few found irregularities they had not known were there. The Whitmore Institute's case had pulled back a curtain that a lot of people in the archival world had preferred to leave closed. Jeannie Nelson is currently serving her sentence at a federal corrections facility. The $342,000 she made from those sales is being recovered slowly through a restitution process that will likely take years. But here is the thing that stays with you when you follow this story all the way to the end. Jeannie Nelson did not steal money. She stole proof that the past ever happened. She took the only surviving records of real people's real lives and sold them to strangers who would never understand what they were holding. And for some families, that proof is simply gone. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And click on the next video, because the next case is just as important as this one.